Looking for pain points is a great way to figure out how any brand can fit into someone's life.
Welcome to Better PR Now, Episode 1. I'm Mark Phillips, and today we're talking with my son, Dylan Phillips. Now, before you start thinking that this is just going to be one big bag of nepotism, there's a reason I wanted to talk with Dylan, particularly at this time. When this interview was recorded, he had just finished grad school and was starting his career. I wanted to explore his experiences as a student and intern, as well as his hopes for a future working in communications. We'll explore the importance of formative research in brand communications, the power of storytelling, and how to use specific online resources at just the right time. I think you'll find this interesting. Let's jump in. I wanted to save this very first interview for Dylan because it's a special occasion. He just finished graduate school just a week ago, and I wanted to give him the absolute first interview. So Dylan, you just graduated from the Brandcenter at Virginia Commonwealth University. Tell us about that program.
Well, it's a 2-year graduate program for advertising. It's really intense, sort of boot camp style when you first get there. There are different tracks that people take, whether you're more of an art direction or copywriting, or someone like me who's a strategist. We also have an experience design track, which is essentially creative technology. But it's 2 years and lots of presentations and a lot of student work for big brands and small brands and sometimes live clients.
So why did you pick the Brandcenter? There are a lot of graduate programs in advertising and marketing around the country. Why the Brandcenter?
Well, I was really interested in getting into advertising strategy. And there are a lot of options for people that are looking to get into art direction or copywriting, whether it's Creative Circus or the Miami Ad School. But Brandcenter is the only place that has like a full program for strategy. So
tell me a little bit about the strategy track. What does that entail?
We do things like ethnographies where we go to people's homes and learn about how they use products. So we do things like digital anthropologies where we learn how to, we all are professional Googlers, but there are ways to be more effective at that. We make subculture documentaries and really get entrenched in a subculture that we aren't a part of to learn as much as we can about those sort of people. And really the whole point of the track is to learn how to learn about people and how that applies, and think strategically and how that applies to advertising. So tell me a little bit more about this idea of thinking strategically from a marketing and advertising perspective. What does that mean? Well, a lot of it has to do with asking why. So you need to understand what the essence or the soul of a brand or company is. You need to figure that out. And if that's already defined for you, then you need to figure out, who cares about it? Why do they care about it? And so when you can understand both who on a DNA level the brand is and who the people are that love it or could potentially love it, then you can see sort of a bigger picture of what you need to do to make a commercial. But it needs to be based on knowledge that you have that will connect with the audience that you want to connect with. I think that pretty much sums it up. So that knowledge gives you insight into maybe the connection that the company or its products have with the people that might be consumers of those products or customers of that company? Yeah, usually you figure out who the people are that love it or who the people are that you want to love it. And that way you can not only figure out where you want to talk to them, whether that's on the internet or television or more traditional like newspapers or whatever, but also how you talk to them. And it can inform, and this is the side I'm more interested in, it can inform the creative decisions that go into the communications. And a lot of advertising is headed more towards a lot more content creation that's actually less advertising, more just entertainment that happens to be connected to a brand. And so if you can figure out what people love, then you can create things. Content is such a buzzword, but it's, you can create value that you can add to their lives rather than just trying to distract them for a minute to get their attention about a sale or something. That's interesting. So how do you've talked about
this understanding, this insight. You talked about being professional Googlers. How do you go about, in addition to using Google, and maybe talk about, different ways to use tools like Google, how do you go about doing this research or getting this insight so that you are able to help a brand better understand and make those important connections?
So brand planning or strategy came about in the late 80s, I believe, but it came over from Europe. And so there have been strategists for a number of decades now that didn't have the internet at their fingertips to do this stuff. So a lot of it was focus groups, man on the street stuff, just trying to get people's opinions. What's amazing now is that everybody has a voice and people, really don't hesitate to use it. So one good thing to do is just go on Amazon and read reviews, because that's where people feel the strongest, is in reviews. Also, if something's just sort of happening trend-wise, you can almost guarantee that you can find something about it on Reddit. That's usually, it's called the front page of the internet for a reason. It's funny, there's a cycle that sort of happens. That if you find something on Reddit, it might not have happened yet on Facebook or on Twitter or on BuzzFeed, but it's sort of like a cycle. It starts on Reddit, then you'll see some stuff happen. On Twitter, usually is more quick with the uptake, and then you'll see it on Facebook trends on the side of your wall. And then eventually there's a BuzzFeed article about it, and then the people that are the most late to the event or whatever it is will be sharing the BuzzFeed article most likely.
So if your business involves being sensitive to or being able to spot emerging trends for whatever reason, Reddit's a good place to be?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Obviously, you're not going to just be searching for, whatever your company is, but themes and trends surrounding that. So say if you owned a mountain biking shop, you would look at what people are talking about within the mountain biking forums, and also maybe within other outdoorsy sort of forums and chats.
So what about old style, the traditional types of research, like doing focus groups or doing man on the street interviews, those intercept type interviews? Is that way of doing research dead in your mind?
Not at all. I think it's very, very important. I like to use the internet, like I was talking about, sort of to formulate an idea at first. And then when I get sort of a concept and I'm able to talk intelligently with people so let's go back to the mountain biking example. Say I'd never, ever mountain biked before, but I was working on a project.
Which you have.
I have, but imagine that I hadn't.
Right.
And so I would go to Reddit first, go on the internet first, try to figure out what's the lingo, what's the sort of language that people use, what are the trends, and what do people like about it, what do people love about it. That way, when I do talk to people that are involved in that activity, I can speak intelligently enough to spark conversation.
Right. If you were in product development, would you be also looking for pain points, or where people are having problems, or where they're expressing frustration as potential problems that your company could solve or offer solutions to?
Yeah, I don't think that that's just a place for somebody working in product development either. I think that looking for pain points is a great way to figure out how any company can fit in, or a brand can fit into someone's life. So even if you didn't do product innovation, if I was just working at an ad agency, there might be, one way, if we're making communications for a mountain biking brand, we might be able to figure out, mountain bikers really hate getting hit in the shins with their pedals. It hurts. So say that's a common problem. Maybe that shows up in an ad. Then that way, it's a little piece of truth that when actual mountain bikers see it, they're like, okay, they get what I care about, because that happens to me all the time and it sucks.
So the truth resonates?
Yeah, for sure. I think if you can show people that you're not faking it is important.
So it allows you to be genuine.
Right.
Things like Reddit allow you to survey the landscape and see trends that are emerging, identify opportunities.
You can also find people on Reddit to talk to.
Tell us about that.
So not only does it paint a picture with conversations that are already happening, but you can get involved as well, obviously. So you could say, hey, can we talk about this? You could pose a question that people will respond to. And then if the answers are something that you're interested in, or particular answers are interesting to you, you can reach out to that person, send them a message. And It's interesting, the community on Reddit seems more willing to help each other than a lot of other communities online. And so if you're just sort of straightforward with them and say, hey, I'm working on a project and I'd really like to talk to you about A, B, or C, then more than likely, and I've had this happen a bunch of times, people will say, okay, yeah, I'll definitely. And whether it's just a series of emails or whether they, want to Skype with you or whatever, you get to talk with somebody that's actually entrenched in what you're trying to learn about, which is, way more valuable than just reading.
Right. Historically, we've been told to define demographic personas or avatars of our perfect customer or our stakeholder or our public that we're trying to engage. Does Reddit allow us to go beyond that, or not just Reddit, but tools like that allow us to go beyond that and actually go to real people and allow us to dive deeper and go specifically? They're not abstractions anymore. They're real living, breathing people that we can go to and say, what do you think about this? If this were a product, would you be interested? If you had shin guards for your mountain bike, would you wear them, or would you think it was dorky?
Right. I think that it definitely allows for that, but I don't think enough places are taking advantage of that. It's really easy to turn to a statistic and say, well, this kind of says this, so we'll just do this. It's much more compelling to say, well, this guy's name is Tom, and this is what sucks about his life, or this is what he doesn't like about this product, or this is how this product does make his life better. Those are some of the best ads, is when you see real people and how they're affected by, whatever it is, and how that it's just, human beings were story driven. And as much as numbers can tell a story, it doesn't resonate with us the same way that telling about an actual individual interacts with something actually does.
Right.
I mean, it's like reading numbers of people that have died in a war. At some point, it just becomes a number and a statistic, and it's like, well, I can't even imagine that. But if you hear one story about one person and you get details about them dying, it's a much more impactful way of
So it becomes
thinking.
relatable when it's one person's story.
Yeah, for sure. Or, even a group of people, maybe more than one, but as long as it's a human story rather than just numbers.
So what's the takeaway lesson from this for companies that offer products or services, how they might be able to use this deep dive approach to better understand how their customers or their stakeholders or their publics think about things and how they might better anticipate their needs?
I think what it really boils down to is conversation. I think a lot of time things get lost within organizations, whether a series, people just sort of playing email tag or just passing off documents rather than actually having conversations about what they want to do. And then also, so that's within an organization, but I think it's really important to get to know, like you said, get to know who your stakeholders are, who your audience is, and treat them like people rather than just numbers on a page, because at the end of the day they feel a certain way about your organization, and that's linked to an emotional connection. And so if you can figure out how to strengthen that in a non-salesy sort of way, in an organic sort of way, it can be just invaluable for you.
Fantastic. Let's go back to the Brand Center for a moment and look at how it works. It has multiple tracks in addition to strategy. What are the other tracks?
Art direction, copywriting, creative brand management, and experience design.
So why did you pick strategy?
Strategy seemed like a good mix of problem solving and creativity, which I really enjoy. And it allows you to really get into culture and think about that sort of stuff. And I'm really into all that. So it just seemed like a good fit.
At the Brand Center, you work in teams. You function as an ad agency where you work on actual problems, real world problems, sometimes for real world clients. Tell us about some of the projects that you worked on while you were there.
Oh, we worked on such a wide variety of things. So some of them are more hypothetical, or completely hypothetical. Whether it's first semester, we worked on a project for Marvel, coming up with a new superhero and marketing that. But then we also have real world clients. We worked on one project was this cheesecake company. It was interesting because most of us went and tried it and didn't know what to think about it really. But it was trying to be sold as a high-end luxury sort of dessert. but they're in like essentially baby food jars. So
is this a startup?
I guess it was a startup. It wasn't brand new though. It was around for a while. And it was interesting. Working with a live client was a little bit difficult because he was very, very strict on what we could change, what we couldn't change. In the class, the teacher expected us to change everything and do whatever we wanted, so we did. But he, at the end of the day, had the final say on what would happen. And what ended up happening at the end was he stuck with his old stuff, and
which is the client's privilege, right?
Well, sure.
It's their prerogative.
Yeah. But a lot of the stuff that got made, there was like 20 teams or something
that were working on this same project.
Yeah. And, a lot of stuff that got made there wasn't 20 teams, there were like 10 teams, but a lot of the stuff that got made was really, really good. And, some people recommended repositioning it, trying to change who we were talking to. Some people just, changed the logo and sort of the visual language of the brand. And he decided to stick with the same stuff that he just kind of came up with himself, which I guess is all right. But there was a lot of good stuff that he just kind of turned away. Right. But it was overall, people had an interesting time working on it.
Right. So experiences like that, do you think that those prepare the Brandcenter students for life in real agencies and life in the real world?
I think so. So even if we're not working on a live client, the professors act as a client, and they're usually, in my experience, they're much tougher than any live client I've ever interacted with. They're, obviously they give their feedback in class in front of all of your peers, but then you also get to sit down with them and hear about, why, where you went wrong or where they think that you could have pushed it further. And a lot of the times it's not, for a strategist, the criticism that you can get is that you didn't push it far enough or you didn't think it through all the way. But they, critique all of it. So the art directors might say, well, this isn't very well designed, or this doesn't make sense for who you're trying to talk to. So if the strategist and the creative team aren't meshing well, then sometimes that comes off. But yeah, there's all sorts of stuff that happens. The live clients that I've interacted with in Brandcenter settings or whether at an agency this summer, they've always been really nice, or at least compared to my experience at school.
Right. Did you come out with thicker skin than when you went in?
I think so, especially about like presentations. That's something that you kind of just get a lot of reps in. And, first semester you're presenting almost every week, and it tapers off a little bit towards the end, but by then you've given so many presentations and talked in front of so many people that something that I think a lot of people get nervous about is doing that. And by the end of Brandcenter, that's definitely something that almost everyone gets over and gets better at. So yeah, I think so, definitely. Tougher skin.
Any tears shed among either you or your classmates over the course of the 2 years?
Oh, I never cry. But there's definitely some crying that happens there every once in a while. It gets stressful.
What, overall,
great experience.
Yeah. So for students who are finished their bachelor's and are considering grad school and are definitely in a marketing track, would you recommend the Brandcenter?
Yeah, 100%. My advice to that would be have a good idea of what you want to do before you apply. I see a lot of people realizing about halfway through that they wanted to be in a different track, and it's very difficult to switch. Some people do it, but if you really, really love writing and you want to be a copywriter, then you should apply it as such. And the acceptance rate isn't super high and kind of difficult to get in, but it's totally worth it. And application is long and a lot of work, but it's definitely worth the experience is definitely worth the effort they put it in.
Great. So let's go back to some of the projects that you worked on. What are some of the most memorable ones?
Well, we worked on, we had a side project. It was with a live client working under a grant from the Department of Energy. We rebranded nuclear energy. And
what was the task?
So it was the nuclear department in VCU was working under a grant. They approached Brandcenter and they said, we have this grant money and we want to have Brandcenter teams compete to rebrand nuclear energy. Basically, what they had found out was that nuclear energy in general just has a very negative perception, and they weren't really sure why. And they were looking for creative solutions on how to talk about it, how to even brand nuclear energy, and how could that improve? Because it's such a great form of energy and it's such a clean energy. But issues with it are there's legislation against making it more renewable than it currently is. About 20% of the US's electricity comes from nuclear power currently. And right now there's a ton of lobbying that goes on from, gas companies that basically keeps nuclear from advancing and becoming more of a predominant form of energy in our country.
So your team won?
My team won, yeah.
Yeah. And what did you come up with?
Well, so it started off with, like I talked about before, my processes with strategy. I did a lot of reading on the internet and a lot of talking to people. And I found that a few key things. One was that in general, people didn't really like nuclear energy that much, but most people were very uninformed. They couldn't give me a really good reason why they didn't like it. It was just sort of a gut reaction thing. Another thing I realized was that people don't really care in general, though, where their power comes from, as long as when they flip a switch, it turns on. And another thing I realized was that there was just one small key difference between people that were for nuclear energy and people that were against it. And that difference was the way that they viewed risk. So the people that were for nuclear energy were more likely to do their own research or do their homework rather, and just try to form an opinion based on information. Mm-hmm. Whereas the people that tended to be against nuclear energy were more gut reaction sort of people, very similar to the sort of people that would see like Ebola on the news, see that it was in the US and freak out and share. They're like, oh, we're all going to die of Ebola. When in reality, that's not actually something that was going to affect your life here in the States. And so then I dug more into the idea of risk. And we found that I started thinking about actual risks that affect American lives every day. Things like texting and driving is really dangerous, or, eating fast food regularly is really not good for you, and over time is really dangerous as well. But people don't really think of those as risk. Whereas people think about Ebola or think about nuclear energy or like ISIS, and then they freak out and get scared. And I was like, well, what's the difference between these two, different types of risk? And I realized that people don't care about the fast food, texting while driving sort of risk because it's domestic and mundane, sort of ordinary. Whereas these other things are more foreign and we don't understand them. They're complicated, and so they're scary. And so we realized that the most exciting thing we could do for nuclear energy was to make it boring. And so just like those other risks. And we realized that it would be a monumental task to try to shift people from hating nuclear energy and not knowing why to being huge fans of nuclear energy and knowing everything about it. So we realized that it'd be much more realistic to shift people to just from I don't like it to meh. So that's what we did. And we came up with this. Our campaign was called Nuclear Is. Mm-hmm. And basically it was just a way for people to see how nuclear fits into their lives. So it was like, it could be nuclear is doing laundry, or nuclear is watching your favorite show on HBO, or nuclear is driving your Tesla. Anytime you're using electricity in your life, that could potentially be a moment where nuclear energy is interacting with you. And so that was what we came up with. We ended up winning and went to South by Southwest as the prize.
That's excellent. So looking back on the whole process at Brandcenter, are there things that you wish you knew that you know now that you wish you knew when you started? Is there advice that you wish you could have given to your younger self before you started?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I probably learned and that would have been helpful at the beginning was how I view idea ownership. When I first started, I thought, well, I'm the strategist, so I'm going to come up with this idea and everybody's going to like it. And, the creative team's going to follow that idea and then, execute based on that. And it's going to be great. When in reality, a lot of people have ideas and directions that they want to go in. And I realized that over time that a strategist's place is not about coming up with the one and only idea and then forcing people to stick to that. But what it's really about is coming up with a lot of ideas, but also facilitating other people's thoughts and other people's thinking, and then providing context for that. So I think what I would tell myself right before I got into Brandcenter, if I could go back now, I'd say, listen more.
Very good. Last summer, you had the opportunity to intern at Goodby Silverstein in San Francisco. You worked on a number of different projects and accounts there. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, it was awesome. I got to work on so many different things as an intern. I got to work on Haagen-Dazs, Sonic, Milk, Comcast. And then I also got to work on 2 separate pitches, which was some of the most exciting stuff because it's all new ideas and thinking and trying to figure out what the agency could do for a brand, it reminded me a lot of how Brandcenter operates, because you kind of look at everything as a pitch there.
What were you most surprised about?
How casual everything is.
In an agency environment?
Yeah. I had never worked at an agency before, and, people, it's okay to go talk to whoever you want to go talk to. I mean, people are busy, but, no one is like closed off in an office that you can't go talk to. Everyone kind of wears what they want to wear and, does what they want to do. Work still gets done. And, obviously the work there is great and the people are great. It's a very comfortable environment.
People working very hard.
Yeah, but not to the point where they seemed like stressed or, uncomfortable. It was like people were working hard because they like what they do and are passionate about it.
Right. Very creative environment.
Oh, definitely. There's, very open office space that kind of promotes collaboration and creativity and all that.
What were some of the most important lessons you learned?
I think being in brainstorming sessions there kind of solidified that lesson I was talking about before, about idea ownership. I think too, I also learned a little bit more about how decisions are made in terms of, you start to think about, well, this CEO just got hired for this brand. What do you know about this guy? What is he like? Because if you're working for him now, he's your client, but you're providing work to him that ultimately he'll have to sign off on. That's just something I'd never really thought about before, like learning individual people's preferences. Mm-hmm. But that's interesting.
So what's next for you? You just finished grad school, been working really hard now. You're job hunting. Where do you see yourself in a year or 5 years?
Working hard at an agency, most likely in California, but who knows with that drought going on. But yeah, I think I'll probably be trying to move up as a strategist and try to create awesome campaigns and work with really, really creative, talented people.
Great. One last question. What's the best piece of advice you ever got?
One of them that was the most memorable for me was I was talking to a creative director once, and I was trying to figure out where I wanted to work. I wanted to figure out what I wanted to do. And he said, where you want to work doesn't really matter. And I was like, do you mean in the agency or a city, or what are you talking about? He said, either one. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is who you work for. And say you want to work for a guy that's amazing that lives in Washington, but you hate the rain. Well, it rains a lot there. Put on a jacket. And so that got the point across to me. It's sort of, he was an older guy. It's sort of like a sort of grandfatherly advice, it seems like, but it's sort of like toughen up, but also the people that you work with and work for are the most important, and not the name on the door and not the city that you live in.
Very cool. Good advice. You got a really cool website. What's the address? How can people get in touch with you?
www.dylanrussellphillips.com.
2 S's, 2 L's?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Terrific interview, Dylan. Thank you very much. Really appreciate the time. Why don't you play us out?
Sure.
There you have it, a view from someone just starting his career. I'd like to check back in with Dylan down the road about his professional experiences and whether his perspectives have changed. Thanks for spending a little time with us today. I hope you found it entertaining, but more than that, I hope you found something you can use in your career. I'd love to know what you think about the podcast. Who would you like to hear on the show? What questions would you like answered? What challenges are you facing? Drop me a line at mark@betterprnow.com. And check out betterprnow.com, where you'll find links to all the resources mentioned in today's episode and so much more. Well, that's it for today. I hope you'll join me on the next session of Better PR Now. To benefit from every episode, please subscribe. See you soon.